Hey, good evening, everyone. Pastor Tom Donnelly, Firmly Rooted Ministries. Just want to make sure, first of all, that you can hear me, Aaron and Greg. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, very good. And I'm going to unmute you, Greg. Welcome to all of you. Christine wants to say hi, friends. So good to see you all. And we got Joseph Peelish. We've got Dana Acton. We've got Diane Giroux. We've got Vivian down in Florida, plus about 25 or 30 other people that are out there. And if you have comments or questions, I'll have the ability to kind of look over on the side of my platform screen, and maybe I can pull some of those across. But let me first start out with, oh yeah, Jessica wants to say, good to see you, Greg. So cool. Alexis Wheeler is on. Awesome. All right. Introduction. Actually, we've been wanting to do something like this for a long time, but the situation that we have before us is allotting us a reason to do something that we've been planning on and wanting to do it in such a way that honors God and honors the issue. These are issues that are really serious, and these are issues that take a lot of thought. They take a lot of discussion. They take a lot of thinking and understanding. And so the title of these talks are Listening to Understand. I, Tom Donnelly, believe fully that I can talk easily. Listening to someone, the scripture says, be quick to listen and slow to speak, so that we first can understand where someone's coming from. Jesus was a master at understanding where someone came from. And in Jesus's perspective, even if they were wrong, he gave them the integrity of who they were, and he was able to dialogue. I think of the woman at the well, and it's a perfect example of how that goes. Susan Schwartz wants to say, hi, Greg. Susan from Integrated Schools. My dear bride is on. Stacy, hello. So this is what it is. I am going to take the rare spot of not being the communicator. I am going to be the moderator. I want to ask questions. And my goal is for all of us to come to more understanding today than we had yesterday. And if this works, then we're going to do this more and more and more, because that's the only thing that is going to change what we got going on, is that to change people's perspectives. So first of all, both of you, thank you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your willingness to be on board with me. And thank you for being Christian men. I know both of you because of your hearts. I love both of you because of your hearts. One of you just happens to be a son. So you put up with me as being a dad type. But the other, I've learned because of my role as a president of the school board, and you and I, Greg, have had numerous conversations. So first of all, this is what I'd like you to do. I would like you to introduce yourselves. I would like you to talk to our listeners as to who you are, what you currently do, and thirdly, what is your Christian faith? Well, what's your walk with Jesus like right now? And let's start there. So maybe Greg, please.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Pastor Tom, just for giving me this opportunity to be here with you, and I thank you for your leadership and for your courage to have this conversation. You were made for such a time as this, and so just to introduce myself to everyone, my name is Greg Myers. I live in Oxford, Michigan. I am a husband, been married to my wife, Michelle, it'll be 17 years in 3 weeks. We have 5 children, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5. And they range from ages 15 to 3. but most importantly, I'm a Christian. Everything that I do, everything that I am is only because of the grace of God and me accepting Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior. And I don't know where I would be without that relationship. And just to say that, I just want to say that right now, in this very moment, my walk with Christ, I just want to experience more of his love. I don't just want to know that he loved me. I want to feel that he loves me. And I'm just so, and I feel that's what allowed me to even have this conversation with you. Because you know, I know that God hasn't given us the spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm able to be here with you all. And so I just want to say thank you for this opportunity.
You're welcome, and thank you. And Aaron Jackson, introduce yourself, talk about your family and your faith walks thus far in your 32 illustrious years.
Yeah. Hey. So yeah, I'm Aaron.
By the way, tell us where you are.
Yeah. So I'm Aaron. I am the minister of outreach, and so it's befitting that I am on the front lines here by Oakland University at a peaceful protest. Yeah, and I love Jesus. I love Jesus for ever since 2010, and it didn't start that way. So I grew up in the church, and both my parents loved Jesus, but it wasn't until I actually had a personal encounter with him that everything changed. And so my whole kind of life journey ever since that moment is, man, everybody's got to experience this. Everybody's got to taste and see how good the Lord is. And so that's just a passion that burns in my heart because there's nothing that satisfies like the love of Jesus. It's literally like, it's like, how do you explain color to a blind person, right? Unless God comes and opens up their eyes, they won't be able to experience it. And so that's literally becoming a Christian, becoming a born-again believer. When you encounter Jesus, you no longer have to interpret the world around you with just your five senses, right? He comes in and he does something supernatural, and you see it just something that's more beautiful than your eyes can see. And so, yeah.
That's a good word. That's a good word. And so real quickly then, maybe Aaron will go with you first. What in particular, facing such a large issue like this racial divide and this racial injustice, how does your faith help you interact with this issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll be honest. When the video first came out, my heart filled with rage, and I didn't know what to do. And so when you're in moments like that, what do? You get on your knees and you pray, like, God, how do I deal with this? And so without God, I have no idea how. Well, I mean, you kind of see what people are doing, but honestly, yeah. So I think God is the only one that can give peace and give kind of understanding. And I just got this revelation that the government of man can't do anything for us, right? It's got to take a heavenly government to come in, right? And so as the church, this is where we need to be, right here on the front lines. In the midst of it, in the midst of the chaos, we gotta be out here as agents of change, as ambassadors of heavenly government. Come and just like when Jesus sent the disciples out, he says, preach this message that the kingdom of God has come near to you, right? And so that's what it is. us as bearers of the kingdom of God need to come near to these people who are in darkness and be agents of change and stand for justice because Jesus stands for justice. Yeah, I hope that
Amen.
answers the question.
Amen. How about you, Greg? How does your faith just help you get through or navigate a time like this?
Well, I just don't know how. I mean, I can just see that it will be very, very difficult for a person who doesn't have faith to be able to navigate this situation. I just couldn't even imagine where I would be right now if I didn't have Jesus in my life. There's a scripture that is one of my favorite life verses, and in Luke 10, Jesus asked the lawyer. He asked him, "Who is written in the law, and how do you read it?" And the lawyer answered him, said, "You shall love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and your neighbor as thyself." And then Jesus answered and said, "You have answered right. Do this, and you shall live." And every time I think about that scripture, the main verb for us to do as a believer is just to love. And if I didn't love, if I didn't have the love of God working on the inside of me, I don't know how I will be reacting in this moment. And that's the thing that sustains me and keeps me going. It keeps me as a good husband, as a good father, as a good neighbor. And I just can't see myself without Christ in my life.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I know that what was it, just 2 weeks ago, you and I talked to each other on the phone and cried, right? Just cried. You talk about how do you respond to stuff. So let me let's get down to things we need to understand, gentlemen. Things that we need to understand. Greg, you said to me at one of our breakfasts that we had in Oxford, "Tom, you're almost 60 years old. How many times in your lifetime have you had to think about your whiteness in a situation?" And I told you, never. I don't ever have a thought of being white. And I think that was the beginning of my enlightenment of what I don't know, because you then said, I have to do that nearly every day. Would you just share an example of ways in which a black man or a black individual today in the 21st century, not in some huge big issue, but even some of the smallest living in a community issue, share one or two, and I'll let Aaron share one or two.
Mm-hmm. So we moved to Oxford about 3 years ago. And, this has been, I can give you a very recent example. This global pandemic has caused, a lot of people to have to follow the governor's stay at home orders. And so when it first started, I was getting cabin fever. I was staying at home and I wanted to get out, and I was just like, oh, what am I going to do? And after about 2 weeks, I decided that I could just go outside and go for a walk in my neighborhood. And so, I've been living here for quite some time. However, I'm one of very few African Americans that live in Oxford. And, for those who don't know, and I'm just guessing here, but I would say the demographics of Oxford is at least 90% white. I know the schools are at least 92% white. And so when I go outside for my walks every morning, I make sure I have this hat on. And that this hat, because it has the O on it, I hope that everyone knows that, you know, I belong here. I live here. But I definitely don't go out without it. I don't just go out like this, because I don't want anyone to assume that I'm a stranger or that I don't live here. And then, you know, Tom, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Ahmaud Arbery, with what happened to him. And when I saw the video, I cried. And he, you know, he went out for a jog. He went out. The media tells us that he went out for a run, and he was running. And me going out in my neighborhood was the thing that was helping me to endure this stay-at-home order, helped me to just endure this pandemic. That was what we were using as a family to cope through this. We would just walk. And then right after I watched the video, Aaron and Tom, right after I watched the video, my son asked me if he could go for a walk. And I hesitated. And then I just pushed it down, pushed that fear down, and said, you can go, and he's fine. He came back. But that's just one example. You know, this skin doesn't come off. It doesn't. The very first thing people see is they see that I'm a Black man. And so that's just one example of many of ways that I think about how I navigate and traverse this world as a Black man.
And so let me ask a follow-up question, Greg. Was I correct in saying that for you it's daily and kind of continuous? You're always analyzing your situation?
Yes.
And we'll get into a conversation like this when we get you and your wives on board. But having 5 children in school, it hasn't always been that easy for them to be in a school that's 92% white, and you always fear those stigma attachments that they're going to call your child a certain name, or because he acts a certain way, he's now going to be that troublesome Black kid, right? You said things like that. These are things that you and your wife wake up talking about, worrying about, praying about, and so I appreciate your honesty. Aaron, how about you, bud?
Yeah. So I mean, Greg is a trooper. I honestly, I can't see myself ever moving to a predominantly white neighborhood. I feel, I just feel comfortable where I'm at, you know, surrounded with Black people who look like me. And so, yeah, there's just different things like, you know, if you get pulled over, you haven't been doing nothing, or even if you have, like you've been speeding or whatever, it's a totally different scene, right? And so, I don't think I know many Black people who don't make a phone call, you know, or now start a live video, right? Just so you have some kind of witness, right? The other day, a cop got behind me, and I was on my way to the Legacy Center, and I had just talked to Mom. You guys had pulled into the McDonald's, and I thought, oh well, if I call them, they can come and be right next to me. You know, if I get pulled over, they can come and they can tell them, hey, I'm just going to work. And so it's different. It's different, and you definitely have to think about it on a regular basis, right? And even those times when you forget about it, people remind you, like, hey, why are you talking white? Like, hey, this is how I talk, because I don't talk with like slang or something like that. That means I'm trying to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. It's just, yeah, it's different perspective that we, everybody needs to see.
So let's dig in there a little bit. So Tom Donnelly's driving down the street and he sees flashing lights in the rearview mirror. Tom Donnelly he pulls over to the side of the curb and says, "Dang it." Right? I got caught, or whatever it might be. But Aaron, I understand, if I heard this from Adrian or Kimberly, I understand that since you've owned a Tesla, you've been pulled over for nothing.
Yeah, a couple times. So
what goes through your minds when you see red lights in the rearview mirror?
Like, they probably don't think they probably think I stole this car, or there's like these generic descriptions, right? A black man, and we all fit that, and so it's like we don't know what's going to happen,
And Aaron, did I understand that you call Adrian every time something like that happens so that you have a witness on the phone?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So she has to put up with that stress that you're pulled over and that tension.
Yeah.
Yeah. Greg, what do you think about when those lights are flashing in the back of the window?
I have a good story about this. So, I mean, when I was younger, I did get pulled over quite a bit. I'm 42 now, but in my early 20s, I got pulled over quite a bit. And but I don't want to talk about when I got pulled over, but I want to talk about a story that I heard from a white coworker years ago. And he was kind of bragging. He was bragging about how he got pulled over maybe a block away from his house. The lights come on. He ignores the lights, drives up to his residence, gets out of his car, walks into the door and closes it. Walks in and closes it. And the police drove away. And when I heard that story, I thought he was from another planet. Like there was absolutely no way possible that I would do anything of that nature. I wouldn't even have thought to do anything like that. What I would, if I would have did something like that, I would have been expecting something hitting me in the back. Every time my mother, God rest her soul, had to have to talk with me when I was a teenager of how to act when you get pulled over by the police. My daughter is 15. She's about to get her permit, and I'm gonna have to have that talk with her. And she's gonna argue with me up and down that nothing's going to happen to her, and I'm gonna have to say, no, you need to listen to what I'm telling you, and you need to do as the police says. Because and my mama said this, and I'm gonna say this to my daughter, and I'm gonna say it to all my kids. I just need you to come home. Do whatever the police officer says do. I just want you to come home. because George Floyd should have went home. He should have went home. And he ain't going home.
So that takes us to the meat of the discussion. The injustice in this whole racial issue. In a lot of ways it's twofold, I think, isn't it, guys? And correct me if I'm wrong. It's some of these bad things shouldn't be happening to people, and two, when they do happen, there doesn't seem to be justice that comes full around to hold accountable those who have done something. And so those two pressures, the seemingly repeating of improper behavior upon black people, black men, is part of the discussion. But it's like everybody says, I know that we're equal and I know that we should love each other, and I know, but that's not the experience. And secondly, when someone acts out of the norm, there's not a history of them going to court, paying the price, ending up in jail. But you've seen time and time again, and we all have, where charges weren't pressed, nothing was happened. Is that the tension? Is that the tension that drives you, Aaron, out there today? Is that what's going on? You're muted. Hold on, Aaron. Hold on. You got to unmute.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's sure. Yeah. Growing up, hearing my dad, like you talking about your daughter, my dad having these conversations with me, and in my eyes, I'm thinking, Dad, that was a long time ago. That was, it's not, the world has changed. The world is different. And then you get pulled over for the first time, right? And then you start hearing all these reports, right? You start seeing the news, and like you said, like there's no conviction, right? I think out of all the situations in Minneapolis for the last 20 years, there's only been one cop that's ever done time for killing somebody, and he was a black man who killed a white woman.
I think I read a similar article. That in the state of Minneapolis or Minnesota or whatever, in 20 years, one cop, and it was a black cop.
Yeah. And so you're like, man, there's got to be justice. There's got to be, it's like they're chanting, Black Lives Matter, right? And there was one guy who, as we're chanting like Black Lives Matter, this guy, comes by and he says, all lives matter, and I said, that's the reason we're protesting. That's the very reason we're protesting, is so that all lives will matter in America. Right now, it doesn't. Right now, that's not reality, but that's the goal of our protest, that we will all matter, right? That it doesn't matter the skin color, doesn't matter anything, but that you will matter as a person. And yeah, so that's why we're
So I think your point is that we can't say it's not wrong to believe that all lives should matter. It's not a false statement. And this, what happens is people get on these external opposite sides of the pendulum. But the fact is that we can only say they all matter when they all are mattering. right? When there is actually the equality in everyday practice of society, then we can start saying all lives matter. And I think that if we go on this journey, we're going to find that once we have fought the fight and gotten Black Lives to Matter, that we're going to find other groups in our country where that feel they don't matter, and they're treated as less than something. Um, um, so let's deal with some of the phrases. Let's deal with some of the phrases. Would Greg, what is your response to "but all lives matter"? Is yours
Uh,
similar to Aaron? You got a different take?
well, there's a I heard this metaphor, and let's just say, for instance, all houses matter. Okay, let's just say that all houses are of equal value. Okay.
Okay.
However, there's a house on the corner that's on fire. So yeah, all houses matter, but right now that house down there is on fire, and so we got to send resources. We got to call the fire truck, and we got to send the fire truck down there. We got to make sure that the fire hydrant is working and take out that fire that's over there at that house, or that house will be destroyed. And so yes, all lives do matter, and Black lives are under a lot of stress and distress.
They're on fire. They're on fire. And so
Mhm.
there's a fire that needs to be put out, and then all the homes will be homes and all be the same. But there's a fire that needs to be taken. I love the metaphor. I love the metaphor. Because, see, one of the things I think is we start screaming, we throw these bombs from these two islands, and we keep throwing these counter statements out. And none of us disagrees with the statements. I mean, the average Black person doesn't think all lives don't matter. They just want to matter as much as the others. And I like your illustration there that imagine a neighborhood where a house is on fire. They're all equally valuable. They're all important. But right now, that one is going to get in big trouble, die, or it needs to be saved and brought back to the state in which it's equal to all the others. And that's an interesting, I love that analogy. So thank you. Thank you for that. So some might say, well, let me ask it this way. How do you feel about the rioting? There are statements made sometimes on Facebook and other places that contrast the awfulness of what happened on the streets of Minneapolis and what's happening today. And I would think that, well, I'm going to let you go at it, but I think that you would say that that's an offensive comparison, but you also wouldn't agree that looting businesses is what you would condone. But I'm going to let you speak to those, and I'm going to be quiet. So maybe, Aaron, you go first.
Yeah. So I think it's hard when we see somebody post about buildings who haven't said anything about George, right? Or they even, some person had, mentioned, the dog getting choked, with the Amy situation. Like, how could she choke that dog? I hope they take that dog. And then the very next post that they post is about, I can't believe they're knocking down these buildings. This isn't right. And it's like, how can you care more about a dog than you do a human life? And so I think it's, yeah, we're not for the rioting and we're not for, buildings getting burned, but it's address, what happened first, right? Like a man lost his life wrongfully, right? A man was murdered, and by three cops, and only one of them has been arrested. and people are hurt, and people respond, react to pain differently. And we even know that a lot of these riots are started by professional rioters, right? They're getting paid to stir up things. And when you're not in your right mind, when you're hurt, when you're angry, when you feel like you have no voice, and people are paid to start chaos, I can see without Christ like joining in, and for that to take the attention away from the reality that a man wrongfully lost his life, and that you could be more worried and concerned about material things that can be replaced, but a George that will never go home. That it hurts. Seeing posts like that when there's nothing else on your timeline about George, it really hurts. It really hurts.
Greg?
Well, so Martin Luther King Jr. had a quote, and I just put it up on my phone so I can make sure that I said it correctly. And it was he said it in a speech in 1967. And I think it's as relevant now as it was then. And he said that a riot is the language of the unheard. And of course, as Christians, I don't condone looting and rioting. But I do. I want to be concise with what I say. I don't agree with the looting and the rioting, and I do also at the same time understand it. So I don't agree. You shouldn't be out there looting, and you shouldn't be out there destroying property. But Tom, you said it in an earlier post that the rioting is a distraction. Is people now focusing on the wrong thing. It's just to hurry up and get your mind off that George Floyd lost his life, and he not the only. And I mean, and so this has been bubbling up. And then another thing that we need to consider is that these people are out here rioting in the middle of a global pandemic. So like we're supposed to stay home. A lot of us supposed to stay home, but it just comes to a point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I don't condone. I don't. I'm not out there doing that. If my children was out there doing that, I would be ringing them back in. But and at the same time, I understand. Because I would just say, in the history of this country, Black people are they just tired? They followed all the rules. They've crossed every T and they've dotted every I, and they've protested and had civil, safe, peaceful protests, and still nothing happened. We've had great legal arguments. Brown versus Board of Education occurs, and still schools are unequal, and all these laws, and I'm supposed to have certain rights, and I'm supposed to have the Constitution backing me, and I'm supposed to be in the greatest country in the world, and yet and still George Floyd don't get to go home. Ahmaud Arbery don't get to go home. This was happening when I was a little kid. I remember Malice Green way back in the early 90s. And he ain't get to go home. And Rodney King, and I mean, we could just go right on down the list. And so
Well,
then,
isn't that the key? We could go down, right?
yeah,
This guy could go to 1968
mm-hmm,
and Martin Luther King Jr.
mm-hmm,
So I think if there are some stigmas that exist, I'm going to try to get into your shoes, looking at the white culture.
I do want to say
Yeah, Aaron,
this
go
too,
ahead.
though. We, as a country, we have to change the narrative, right? And so in Minneapolis, they credited the riots for the conviction, right? They said because of all the rioting, we've convicted this guy. And so if you give it validity, if you say, man, this is the only way we're going to hear you, you're going to produce more of that. Or if you just uphold justice in the beginning, before a video has to go viral, before people get out in the streets, if you uphold justice, right, none of this happens.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Talking about the Aubrey situation, when you and I were talking about it, you had to tell me that it took place, Greg, back in like February. I didn't even know that. Like it didn't hit the news the next day. It didn't hit the news the next month. It didn't hit the news 2 months later. It hit the news when a video appeared. I have tried deeply to try to figure out what I would feel like if my son got killed, murdered by somebody. And no matter how loud I screamed and yelled, nobody listened and nobody paid attention until and like you said, I got the whole Constitution backing me up. I got all the laws in the world backing me up. But still something's in my way. That tells me there is something wrong with the system, because the Constitution is good. Our rules of law are good. The problem is somewhere there are systems in place that allow them to be bypassed unless attention's paid. And that, right? Like for instance, if there was no camera last week, if there was no one shooting video, we wouldn't be having this discussion. It would just be one more black man. And my heart just breaks that we live in a world where it takes attention like that. It should be immediate attention because a human being died. It should be immediate. It should be immediate. Why? What are some of the things frustrate you when you look at posts from white people? I think one of the biggest ones, Aaron, you've shared with me is, Aaron, that video that you share with me today, right? We don't want to feel like that was our relative, that was our family member that was just knelt on and killed by a police officer just because he could. So immediately, what do you think? What do we do as white people? Are we creating different narratives? Are we buying? What gets us out? What do you think prevents us from diving deep into the pain? Because we would, I guess, if it was a white person and a black cop. What are your thoughts about that? Because I think in order for us to understand the best, we have to be able to feel what you feel. What are we missing? What would you say to us?
So I would say, like, imagine it was like for you, Pastor Tom, we're in a relationship, right? Imagine that was me.
Don't you say it. Don't say
it. Right? Imagine that was me. You know my life. You know my story. You know You know, they're not going to find dirt or all this junk about, you know, my past or anything like that. What if it wasn't George? It was me. You're going to feel it.
Yep.
Where every single black person in America, every single person in America who looks like me, we feel it like that, because it is us. It is our family. It is, you know what I mean? Like, that's how we feel. It's not distant. It's not separated. It's not far away. It's home. It's at our front door. At any moment, that could be any one of us. And that's why it's so encouraging to look out here and see people standing up, and they're saying enough is enough. We're done with this.
Greg, as I was preparing for this, one of the things I thought about was, I mean, I am someone who watched Kennedy get assassinated. I watched Martin Luther King Jr. I've been through a lot of this stuff, and I've seen it. I just remember when, and I don't want to get on this as an issue, but I'm using it as a comparison. When we began to lose American soldiers and watching innocent American people in the Middle East get their heads lopped off, we reacted. We reacted at the core of our being. We reacted because with that we just couldn't wrap our minds around the vileness of that type of barbaric treatment. And rightfully so, a righteous anger well up inside of America. It didn't matter whether you're black, white, green, blue, it didn't matter, whatever. We need to have this same kind of feeling about our American citizens. It's happening to them in America, and not that their heads are getting lopped off, but they're dying. They're dying at abuse. They're dying at abuse of power is probably the best way to describe it. And then I guess I want to ask you, do you think that's an accurate assessment?
You know, what happened to Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. I think about Emmett Till in the 60s. You know, these are modern day lynchings. And instead of it being in a photograph, is videotaped. And it sends a message to all of us. You know, lynchings, public lynchings were done to send messages. They sent messages to Black people to let them know that if you misbehave, this could be your future. And then they send messages to white people saying, see, we knew we were better than them. You know, racism isn't just affecting race. We all in America, you know, race is a social construct. It's made up. It's made up to show, to distinguish who has power and who doesn't. And so when we get a message like that, Black people aren't the only ones that get the message. Everybody gets the message. It's sent to everyone. It's, you know, we need to get back to humanity. You know, the biggest reason, and Aaron, you said it really well, the biggest problem for, I believe, for white people is that they don't feel. They can intellectualize everything. They can think about it, but if you don't feel, if you don't put a heart in your mind and put your mind in your heart, if you don't have that right attitude, I mean, if you don't look at George Floyd as being connected to you And he is. Because he's American. We all are. He's a human being. If you just looking at that and just acting like, oh, well, that's another black man gone, that's voyeurism. You're just looking at violence and you're disconnecting your feelings from what you're seeing. Because if that happened to your son and if that happened to your daughter, you will be outraged. So that's
great. That's a really, really, really good point. And I think that there probably is, and we can talk about this on another time. We have disconnected emotionally. We look at these things as white Americans, maybe sometimes analytically with our heads, and we know what the laws are. And so we quickly want to say, well, that was just a bad apple, or that was just a bad situation. The problem is when you start adding them all up, we don't want to face the reality maybe that the darn system's broken and it needs a reset. And some of that might be because we don't want to deal with the fact that at 60 years old that I should have been involved much earlier. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe there's a whole lot of things there, but you're right. We all got to get back to the heart of the issue, the heart of the matter, because I like what you said. We're not just Americans. We're just all human beings, right? Period. We're all human beings, and we should be absolutely offended, brokenhearted, weeping on the streets for any human being that would go through what some of these situations that you brought up, what they have gone through. We've been on for almost an hour. We're going to have more of these, but I want to ask one question. What's one heart exercise you would like a white American to do tonight? What one heart exercise would you like them to do? And secondly, what action might you want them possibly to consider? What heart thing would you want them to go through so that they understand? And then what action based upon that understanding would you encourage them to step into? Aaron?
Yeah, I might give. I would say. You guys hear me? Okay.
It's a little bit loud, but we can hear you.
Okay. First off, I would say join a peaceful protest like this one out at Old King University. They're starting to happen more often, and just go during the day. It's going to be completely safe. So let your voice be heard. Like don't stay on the sidelines. Over the day that we can sit on the sidelines. We have to get in the middle. I think as a hard exercise, I would say just research. Look up how many. Look up how many innocent black men have been killed in the last 20 years, and look up how many people have paid for that, right? How many people have been arrested for those crimes.
Not just how many died, but then how many individuals paid justice because of the crime.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And how about you, Greg?
If there's a heart exercise that I would want white people to do, I just want them to breathe. Just breathe.
Go there. Keep going. Keep going.
Because don't take that breath for granted. Because God put that breath on the inside of you. And think about how that God-given gift was taken away from George Floyd. And then if there's an action that you should do, I want white people to really think about why they don't have close relationships with other black people. Now I'm making an assumption. I'm making an assumption that
you don't mean everybody. I get it. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
You're making a statement that all white people don't have any black friends.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying it's a deficit. It's probably a deficit.
And when was the last time you went over to a black person's house for dinner? And when was the last time you had a black person over to your house for dinner? Because this is how you feel. If you just watching stuff on TV and getting stuff from the news and hearing it from the news, then you don't have to put your heart in the game. You got to put your heart in the game. And so until that, I mean, I think just do that introspective work and put your heart in the game. And then then we can talk. We can keep this discussion going.
So Greg, you made two observations that I think are really, really important, especially for any believers out there, any Christians out there. We know that the breath that we have is a God-given gift, that he breathes into us and makes us a living being. If we're born again Christians, we have a spirit breath in us that empowers us to live a different and transformed life. Who are we to innocently take that away from anyone? Anyone, right? That is to take a man's life in both testaments is unacceptable and requires justice. That's a good point. It's a good point. So we're going to wrap up here soon. We lost Aaron. I don't know if he's going to get back on or not. Let's see. Stephanie says, Greg and Aaron, thank you so much for being willing to share your thoughts and feelings today. It's not your responsibility to educate us, but I'm so grateful you took the time to do so. Yeah. And look, somebody has to, and these dialogues are part of, I think, trying to do that. Aaron's my son and you are my friend. And I think it's only because of those relations. I love what you said about relationships. The reason why I teared up, because Aaron says, what if that was me, is because I have a loving relationship with him. He's not just a statistical black man who lives in Pontiac. He's married to my daughter, and I've grown to love him. And so if we don't have black people in our relationships, then we don't have that natural connection that we maybe ought to have a little bit. So some things that I just want you to know, everybody. Renee Curtis says, I want to be educated. And I promise, Renee, we're going to keep doing this. I'm going to have their brides on with them, hopefully next time, a week from now, or next week, and talk about what it's like for the wives and what it's like for a white wife and a black wife and what it's like raising kids that are already getting older. And my daughter who has just little ones. But I want you to know that there could be very, very shortly an announcement about a little bit of a prayer vigil, peaceful protest right here in Oxford that Firmly Rooted's putting on outside the Legacy Center. I'm working with the Sheriff's Department and I'm working with the owner of the Legacy Center, and it looks like we're right there. So look, if you want to do some introspection and you want to come out and do something peaceful, like this conversation has been, I'm guessing in the next hour, you're going to see a post come out that's going to invite you to do so tomorrow. And feel free to come, feel free to share it, but please be cautious. We do not want any trouble. We don't want any troublemakers. We want it to be an experience like this, but a little bit more on steroids, because we're seeing each other face to face. We're doing it together as human beings, and so know that invitation is coming. Greg, thank you, and Aaron, thank you. Renee says my son is afraid. Yeah. I'm worried about the kids of this generation that in 1 year have gone through a coronavirus, complete change in schools, and now this situation. This is why we have to do these things, because we got a whole generation to talk to. We have a whole generation to talk to. All right, everyone, we've got almost 60 people involved, or at least 60 people connected. Could be more than one person at those connections. Greg, I want to thank you. I love you. And we'll keep talking. And like I said, I'd like to maybe have you and Aaron with your spouses next time, if that's possible. And let's make it real, because we're going to talk about it coming right out of the home. What does it look like to live in a marriage and to raise kids and be involved in it this way, right?
Yeah, Pastor Tom, I just want to say again, thank you just for your courage to do this. There's not a lot of people who are doing this, and I'm just grateful for our friendship, for our relationship. I love you, I do. And
I'm all in, buddy. I'm all in. We're going to make a change for your kids and my grandkids. We're making a change. At least we're going to leave it all on the field.
Yep.
All right. I love you. Love all of you. Thank you for participating. Give us some feedback in private messages, or even in this string. Anything that we could have changed, like maybe not having Aaron out on the street. That kid, he didn't tell me he was going to do that. But at any rate, all right, everybody, have a great night. Have a peaceful night. Make it a firmly rooted day tomorrow, and God bless. Peace.